So clearly, things are hotting up, both for the planet and how the world is responding to the climate emergency. So in this next critical decade, much needed action will be driven by young engineering professionals passionate about their planet. Welcome to GYECC 21 on the Move. This is live from the National Grid stand at COP26. We're bringing you the highlights of our September virtual Global Climate Engineering Youth Conference for young professionals around the world engineering the green energy transition. But we've also got some special guests, some live special guests, as well as some highlights from the conference, which is fantastic. So I'm Annette Gann. I'll be your host today, but I'm delighted to introduce you to Nicola Todd, who's Head of Strategy and Innovation at National Grid, and also Jonah Messenger, who is visiting scientist from ETH Zurich, and he's also a One Young World ambassador. So welcome to the two of you. Great to have you both on board. So the thing about this particular conference that was fantastic was that we had our own UK and US graduates curating the content across 4 work streams. So that was amazing. But we actually kicked off the conference with a number of keynote talks. So first of all, we had COP26 President-designate, the Right Honourable Alok Sharma MP. We had our own CEO, John Pettigrew, and we had the CEO from the Committee for Climate Change, Chris Stark. So why not let's have a look at some of the highlights from those keynotes now.
Thank you, Ava, for that introduction, and thank you also to National Grid for organising this conference and to all the young engineers here for their dedication to the environment. Engineers and other innovators are vital to tackling the climate crisis. From building the climate-resilient infrastructure we need to withstand the effects of a changing climate, to developing energy innovations to help drive down global emissions. Because this decade will determine whether we can avoid the worst effects of climate change or not.
Well, let me start by just saying how delighted I am to be here and welcome to our conference. When I think about my hopes for the next 10 years, it really starts with the Paris Agreement, and I hope that in 10 years' time we're still very much on target to deliver the 1.5 degrees limit in terms of climate change. On top of that, I hope we've got real alignment between politicians, business and financial institutions on the actions that we're taking and the actions that we'll need to take to achieve net zero. I'm hoping that the progress that we've made over the last few years with regards to transport continue at pace and that we see a real decline in the internal combustion engine. And as part of that, I'm also really hopeful that we see a significant reduction in the amount of coal that's burnt right across the globe. The last couple of points I'd make is, from a societal perspective, I hope in the next 10 years we're in a position where actually decisions that we make on things like the heating system we use or the car that we buy, that we're taking into account climate change in those decisions. And then finally, and something that's very important to me personally, is that nobody is left behind in what is a transformation right across the globe. I think it's important that everybody participates and that everybody gets the opportunity to participate and nobody is left behind.
Well, I'm really hopeful that we are going to tackle climate change, and I think this is the moment when we're really going to push on with it. But I don't think you need to cross your fingers and hope. There is so much now in place that points towards us actually getting on and tackling this thing now. Most of the elements are now in place for that to happen. Now the how questions come to the fore. How are we going to pull this off? Which government policies are going to implement? How are we going to see the consumer incentives changed to move to zero carbon? How are we going to support all the investment that's needed? There's still far too much reluctance to get into the practicalities of the transition, so maybe that's the last reason for any caution on this. But overall, we're going to do it. I wish we'd been where we are now 30 years ago, but I think there's a great deal to be excited now about as we think about zero carbon and the transition ahead.
So, we'll shortly be inviting you to play our Green Quiz, which was developed by Workstream 3 at our conference in September, engaging generations, green change starts with the individual. So do look out at the bottom of your screen for the ticker running along for the Slido code so that you can join the quiz. So you can start to get yourself ready now. But in the meantime, I'm delighted to spend a little bit of time with Jonah, just talking. And Jonah, who is our visiting scientist from ETH Zurich and One Young World Ambassador, is coming along today to just give us some reflections on some of the content at the conference. So Jonah, I think that when you look back on the keynote presentations that we just heard, I think they were sobering, they were hopeful, but they were a clear mandate for change. So I'm just interested to see what your reflections on that are.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, thanks so much for having me. Thanks so much to National Grid. I think there's reasons for optimism. I mean, I'm an optimist, perhaps a little naive. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or IPCC, they released their 6th assessment of the physical science of climate change earlier this fall. And there was some good news and some bad news. They were able to reduce the range of climate global warming outcomes by the end of the century. So it's unlikely we're going to have runaway climate change of 6, 7, 8 degrees of warming. But the sort of expected warming is 2.7, and that's still too high. Similarly, 1.5 degrees is sort of increasingly becoming out of reach. The special report on 1.5 degrees of warming and sort of capping at 1.5 that the IPCC put out a little while back. So this report sort of said that the nationally determined contributions from the Paris Climate Agreement, they were not going to sort of get us to 1.5. They were going to we're going to overshoot. Yeah. So I think there's a lot of a lot of reasons for hope, yeah, but a lot of work to be done. And I'll just sort of say the International Energy Agency put together their Net Zero by 2050 report, and it sort of said that 50% of the technologies we'll need to decarbonize by 2050 are still not commercial. So there's a lot of work to be done. And for young engineers, this is a great field. Well,
on that, I was just thinking about what do you think the next steps are for young engineers in this next critical decade?
Yeah, I mean, I think innovation is sort of key. I did some work with Columbia's Center on Global Energy Policy, putting together Energizing America, which was our roadmap for tripling research and development and demonstration funding for the United States. And so I think getting into climate innovation for young engineers is really a crucial step, and I think other countries can adapt what we did in Energizing America and adopt it in their nations as well.
Thanks, Jonah. Well, why don't we get on to testing ourselves now, just to test our green credentials, and you guys might want to test out this too. So we're going to go into a short cut-down version of the quiz that Workstream 3 devised. So basically 5 questions will pop up if you want to take a look at Slido. So we'll go through each of those questions, give you a little bit of time to think about the answers, and then we'll go through what the actual answers are. So I'm just going to get myself organized. So we have the first question coming up, so I hope you've got your best green thinking sails on. Which country's leadership has publicly committed to eliminating fossil fuels to become the first fully decarbonised country? So while you're thinking about that, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I sort of think about the recent announcement yesterday from India to be net zero by 2070. I think they got some heat in the media for not making it 2050, but for a country like India that's still industrializing, I think 2070 is a pretty ambitious aim.
So hopefully you've had a chance to have a look at what the possible answers could be. Could it be the United States? Could it be Brazil? Could it be Canada? It's Costa Rica. So that's the answer to that one. We're going to move on now to question number 2. And so this one is, which renewable energy source heats 85% of houses in Iceland, as claimed by the government of Iceland? So while we have a think about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to have a look actually, and so I'm playing along while we're doing it, and actually it's interesting to look at the answers are all kind of renewable type energy. So in the UK, one of the challenges we have is how do we decarbonise heat? So it's really interesting to see what the answer to this is going to be, because it's quite a different position than what we are, where we are in the UK.
Yeah, absolutely. So hopefully, guys, you've had a chance to think about what the answers are. So is it wind? Is it geothermal? Is it solar, hydropower? It's geothermal. Well done. Excellent. So the next one for you, and I hope you're getting into the swing of this now. How many days in a row in 2020 was the UK able to continuously generate electricity without the use of coal?
Yeah, this is increasingly important as we decarbonize. Having high capacity factor, renewable energy technologies, and clean firm power technologies is increasingly important. So I think the UK has done a pretty good job on this with offshore wind, but it's going to be increasingly important as we decarbonize.
Absolutely. So I hope, guys, that you've managed to get a chance to have a look at those, and the answer there is 68 days. Wow. So amazing. On to question number 4. Which country is the current leader of solar and wind power growth in South America?
Yeah, and again, it's really important that when we think about global decarbonisation, we think about the resources we have available and how we make best use of those. So it'll be really interesting to see how that transition's happening in South America and who's leading that. But yeah, it's a really important area.
So I guess as you've been looking through that, you'll be wondering who it is. Well, the answer is Brazil. So fantastic. And on to our last question. How many additional jobs could the renewable energy industry create in the UK by 2030?
Yeah, this is another important one. Being from the States, President Biden has made a big sort of effort in highlighting the potential for sort of green jobs. I think he says when he thinks of climate change, he thinks of jobs. And so I think that's increasingly important as we try and motivate people politically around climate.
And the answer to that one is 150,000. So hope you all got a full house there, and congratulations if you did, and you too as well. Hope no cheating was going on.
Absolutely not.
So at the September conference, we interspersed what we felt were the reality videos of what's really going on around the world and places where climate change is very evident. So the next video that we're going to share with you, something quite close to my heart, Denise Lee, who is an environmental researcher and also a student at the University of Toronto. But this film is from Vancouver, somewhere I love very much. Let's listen to what Denise has to say about climate change affecting Vancouver and Canada.
Hi, I'm Denise Lee. I'm 21 years old and I'm a 2019 One Young World Ambassador. I'm currently in my hometown of Vancouver, Canada, which is right on the edge of the Pacific Ocean. And we are well known for our incredible environment. We have the Rocky Mountains on one side, we have incredible forests. As you can see here, we're well known for our old growth forests. Some trees can grow up to 750 years old. Some of them are much smaller. But we want to give them the chance to grow. And the unfortunate thing about climate change is that it puts all of this in jeopardy. For example, this summer alone, we have had record low rainfall. Vancouver is sometimes known as Raincouver, with just the sheer amount of rain we have. And it got to the point where it really exacerbated our wildfire problem. Currently, at this very moment, there are over 250 wildfires burning in the province alone, not counting the rest of Canada. And so if we want to preserve all of this incredible place, climate change is one of the biggest problems that we have to combat. In addition to all of these effects, sea level rise, Canada has the longest coastline of any country in the world, so we're very susceptible to sea level rise. And not to mention, the rest of Canada is very much at risk at climate change as well. For example, the Arctic regions are warming at 3 times the speed of the rest of the world, and that is mainly populated by more vulnerable populations like Indigenous peoples. And so this is my country. It matters a lot to me, and I want to make sure that this incredible place is preserved for future generations too. And so if all of you are here, you understand why climate change is important. And I think it's important to remember how that will affect the people that are living in these more vulnerable places. And so I urge all of you to use this event here today to remember what exactly it is we are fighting for, because it is worth preserving. And I know that's true for me, and that's why I continue to move forward. So let's get going.
I love that video because it's just so impactful, and I think Denise does a great job with that. Nicola, welcome. So you were the mentor for Workstream 2, which was all about decarbonising within local communities around the world and the challenges with that. And you were a fantastic mentor to them, worked really hard. You did a great job, really brilliant. So, but also you went to the One Young World conference in 2015, didn't you, as a grad back then? And that was around about COP21, wasn't it, with the push to the Paris Agreement. So I'm just quite interested, as we sitting here now on the National Grid stand at COP26, which is amazing, isn't it? What do you think, on your reflections, has changed between then and now, if at all?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important to reflect on what has happened over the last 5 or 6 years since the Paris Agreement. You know, I think when I think about now, and having worked in National Grid for the last 8 years, actually there's been a real seismic shift in the last couple of years in particular, I would say, around even how we talk about net zero. You know, it's part of our vocabulary now. It wasn't a couple of years ago.
It's true.
And actually we've seen a massive change in how we talk about and how we think about climate change, and you know, the kind of imperative of the problem that we have to solve. But I think the other thing I would say is, over the last couple of years in particular, I think there's been a real kind of shift in our attitude to thinking about how do we go faster, how do we do more, are we doing enough, can we be more ambitious here? And there's a real push, and I feel that in National Grid, and I feel that working with our customers and our stakeholders, that actually everyone is kind of united behind this common cause now, and it's about how we do that in the right way and how we go quickly enough. And so I think that's been a real shift actually over the last couple of years in particular.
I think that's very true. I would say that echoes my perception of how it's gone in the last couple of years. But just thinking about the work stream that you were mentoring, so decarbonising local communities, what do you think were the real takeaways from that work stream?
Yeah, I mean, so for people who obviously didn't attend the conference, we were really talking to people about that much more local focus around decarbonisation and how we think about that on a much more granular level. And I think one of the things that really came out of that conversation was the challenges are really different depending on what country you live in, but not even just that, at a local level, what are the priorities, and therefore, you know, are you in a world where people are bought into the kind of need to do something and you're just sort of looking at how you do that in the best way, or actually are you battling against a whole other set of priorities that you know, for countries which maybe there's conflict, or you know, they're really not developed from an industrial perspective, there's a whole other set of priorities that need to be managed. So there's some really difficult challenges and very different challenges, and sometimes, you know, in the UK, you know, where I work, you can become quite ingrained in thinking about it from a kind of more affluent and developed industrial perspective. So it's really important we think about how we make this a fair and just transition for everyone across the world, depending on the role that we have to play. I think the other thing that we reflected on in the workstream actually was the role of young people in making that transition, and we'll probably talk a little bit more about that, but you know, each and every one of those people was so passionate about local decarbonisation and their role that they could play, that was just fantastic to see. And you know, I think we reflected that everyone can make a difference. You know, even if you don't feel like you've got the buy-in at a local level, a local government level, or a national government level, actually we can all make small changes that make a difference. And you know, if there's not a climate movement where you live, start one. You know, that was one of the messages actually from one of our delegates. So you know, really think about and feel empowered to make change.
I think you're absolutely right. Definitely, and I think as part of that, having a green energy transition means you've got to have the right skills to do that. So thinking about green skills for the job, or reskilling, whether it's new skills, reskilling, let's watch a short video now which comes from workstream number 1, who had the green skills be the agent of change workstream. And what they did was they actually asked a number of different people what green change made to them. So let's have a listen to what they said.
Green skills is using my knowledge and passion to make myself and the world a more sustainable place.
Green skills are the tools needed to build a more environmentally and socially just future.
To me, green skills is all about relationships, getting to know, especially getting to know how to work with, the natural, political, and cultural environments that make up our world.
What green skills means to me is the exciting development of new skills and adaptation which enables me and others to be proactive in the movement to net zero and the fight against climate change to ensure a brighter and cleaner future for all.
For me, green skills are the necessary changes we all have to make to save our planet.
So to me, green skills are the capabilities and environmentally focused attitudes which you will have developed from your own past experiences, ranging from soft skills through to technical skills, all of which will help you adapt and seek roles within different industries that are all focused towards building a more sustainable and resource-efficient economy.
Green skills to me will look at the change in the many of the skills and tasks that are currently involved in many existing occupations. For example, it could look at the transition to a low carbon economy, which will require a lot of changes not only to business models but also production.
Green skills to me means finding the most efficient ways to use our natural resources and also finding ways to utilise and adapt knowledge from all industries and disciplines to create a more sustainable future.
Environmental consideration is a green skill that I use.
Green skills give hope to future generations. They will help us live cleaner and more sustainably and allow us to achieve our net zero ambitions by 2050.
To me, green skills is all about understanding what you can do to become a more sustainable person and how your actions impact the environment. For example, when doing the washing up, don't rinse the dishes before either washing them up or putting them in the dishwasher, so then you can use less water.
The belief that we can have an impact on climate change is really important because these are big complex challenges we're taking on, but believing that we can make a difference by delivering net zero carbon enabling technologies is something I find really motivating when coming to work every day.
To me, green skills are all the things that we're already doing, but prioritising the environment when we're doing them. If we're smart, it can be a win-win situation for all of us, including future generations.
To me, green skills is all about understanding what we can do to live more sustainable lives and understanding the relationship between our lives and the environment.
Green skills will enable me to understand the impact of financial decisions on resource efficiency.
Green skills to me means supporting a safer environment starting from our own homes, jobs, businesses, social networks, and so on by applying our skills or occupations in activities that help reduce carbon emission sources, landfill activities, waste pollution, and that also on the positive side contributes to creating green jobs and promoting a sustainable lifestyle in our communities.
Skills are more than just your technical skills that can be used on a day-to-day basis to contribute towards clean energy goals. They also include your passion and motivation to work above and beyond those goals to reach our green energy transition.
Thanks for that, and I should just make a quick apology if you heard some noise in the last segment. We think maybe President Biden was leaving by helicopter because the shuttle bus was full. So I think he's probably on his way now, so not to worry about that. Thanks for the green skills video, so I hope you enjoyed listening to that, and I just thought it might be nice to find out, Nicola, what do green skills mean to you?
Yeah, I mean, as someone that works at National Grid and someone who's an engineer, it's really easy for me to talk about engineering as part of that, but actually I think the skill for me is that each and every one of us has a role to play in decarbonisation, and so no matter what your job is, you need to think about what is my impact, how do I minimise it, and how do I lean in and lead in the right way so that my organisation, my company is thinking about the green transition. So for me, that's the most important skill of all, is that we lean in on this and we really should lead by example.
Fab. And Jonah, what do green skills mean to you?
Yeah, when I think of green skills, green jobs, I sort of think about the transition of fossil energy workers into a low-carbon energy system. I think about India. The biggest coal company in India pays $3 billion annually for pension payments, and that's a pretty big shoe to fill. So I think about hopefully all these folks can transition to clean energy jobs, but if they can't, we need to be willing to sort of step in and financially take care of them.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that we did before the conference in September was to ask the pre-registered people some questions. So that will be some of you listening now, hopefully. So we asked you, how important is it for you to have a job that has a positive impact on the climate? And you can see some of the information coming up on the screen now. And how optimistic are you about the fight against climate change? So there was a real contrast in hopefulness and worry, I think is fair to say. So you have a very important, the reason I chose engineering as a career. And by the way, we had around about 50 countries respond to this, and the core age group was 18 to 24. And then very important for survival in the future, and I mean that's quite sobering really. Guys, I don't know what your thoughts are on some of that data.
Yeah, I mean, you know, when I read it, I was just sort of thinking about, in the lead up to this conversation, Nicola, you mentioned something I really just loved, which was, we're talking about a green industrialization, but many countries haven't actually industrialized yet. So I was talking with a meteorologist from the delegation from Niger, and we were just sort of talking about climate impacts in Niger, and it was sort of funny because he was like, there's actually no emissions to mitigate, there's no industry to decarbonize, relatively speaking. And so I think increasingly sort of it's important for those countries to be able to economically develop, and then also that we get adaptation funding to those folks so that they can really sort of survive and sort of be fruitful in a climate future.
Yeah.
I think from my perspective on those two questions, I mean, I think the first one around, how important is it to me to have a job that impacts kind of climate change and reducing the impact of it. Part of the reason I became an engineer was to work in this kind of industry, and actually having a job where you come in every day and you understand the impact that you can have is absolutely, it's such a motivator to me and to the people I work with, and that's, why I've worked in National Grid for so long. I think when I think about, how optimistic do I feel about the future, I think over the last couple of years, as I sort of reflected earlier, I think there's been a real seismic shift, and actually that makes me feel much more positive about where we're going and the direction we're heading in. As I said, I think, at least in the UK, I think there's a lot of people behind a common cause, and it's just about how we make sure that that imperative is felt across the world and by every country that has an impact, to make sure that we're all heading in the right direction. But, I feel much more positive, and it's a balance, isn't it? We don't want to talk about it so positively that people think there's not an issue to solve. So
Absolutely.
We do need to be careful in how we message that. But yeah, I feel much more optimistic about where we're going, and actually the kind of the might of all the kind of young people in particular, and how engaged they are in climate change and the climate, the kind of impacts we need to have there. I think it's really, really, it's really heartwarming to see that, and so I feel really positive about it.
Yeah, and I think one of the most important things in life is to have a purpose, and there seems to be no better purpose in this next critical decade than having a job that helps with climate change and mitigating it. So I think we've just got a couple of minutes left, and so what I thought I'd do is skip back over to Slido and just see if any questions had come in. So bear with me for a moment now while I have a quick look. Right, okay, I think we've probably got one for you here, Nicola. So this one is hydrogen the most effective solution for HGVs and construction transportation rather than EV tech such as batteries, which won't be ready in time?
Yeah, I think the whole area of decarbonisation of transport is a really interesting one, and something that we talk about in National Grid quite a lot, and I know is a big topic on the global stage. It's something we're looking into. I think there's more work to do in areas like HGV decarbonisation and kind of aviation and that kind of space. I think we're maybe not as mature technology-wise, so I'm not sure we can say we know exactly what the right answer is yet. I don't think we're there, but there's a lot of work to do, and I think we're looking in a lot of the right places, so it'd be really interesting to see how that evolves over the next, in the coming years.
Yeah, it's a real balance, isn't it?
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
Thank you very much for that. Thank you both for coming along. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you both with us today. So fantastic panel. Thank you everybody for tuning in again. It's just been a fantastic conference in September. We really enjoyed having it. It was a privilege to work on it. As I said, we had 4,000 people register for it, 100 countries. That's amazing. So, from that breadth of geography, everybody interested in the green energy transition. So that is a final note from me. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you again soon.
We're so fortunate to have 6 fantastic speakers with us today. all experts in their own field and with decades of experience between them. And when I mentioned that this is a global panel, I really wasn't joking. I'm so excited to introduce the panel. We truly have a global representation here. So my recommendation to you, the audience, is let this conversation act as a springboard to in-depth questions and idea sharing as we work in unison to tackle the most paramount goal of our generation, which is our global zero carbon energy system. And think about what you can do next using this network that you've built here at this conference.